What is your most embarrassing shameful hookup story? In college, the row on my dorm floor kept a cardboard box with condoms in it attached to the wall just above our level by his door in the hallway. I had a date one night and slyly grabbed a rubber out of the box as I was walking down the hall and quickly put it in my pocket. Fast forward to that night and the moment has arrived. We are naked under the sheets in the dark and I reach into my pants pocket for the Jimmy hat. I open it under the sheets and get powder all over my fingers and it smells like poultry. Confused, I turn on the light and it's a ramen noodle flavor packet. I didn't get laid that night. One time I had drunken sex in a hotel room with a chick while several of my friends were passed out on the ground. I found out the next day they weren't all asleep. I lost my virginity in the bathroom at a big party. This girl was not attractive at all. When she was giving me head, I asked if she wanted to have intercourse, to which she replied with my dick in her mouth MHMMMM. Little did I know my friends were listening on the other side of the door. To this day, when I ask them if they want to do something, take a shot, go out to eat, etc., they'll respond with MHMMM. I was 20 years old and having drinks in town with my older sister and a few of her friends, and I remember running into an older woman who was an acquaintance of my mother. I vaguely remember having shots of tequila and dancing with this woman. Skip forward to the end of the night. Somehow we ended up at my parents' cabin guest house and crazy intercourse all night. I wake up to my mom and dad coming in to get the place ready for a renter. We both had a kinda oh no look on our faces and my mom just looked around, said good morning and left to make coffee. Mom and her sat and had coffee for a solid hour while my dad flipped out on me for being stupid and breaking into the guest house and sleeping with my mother's friend 10 years later, and my mother has never mentioned it. I had a girl scream at me in Spanish in the rain outside my house. I just looked at the ground and said I can't speak Spanish. We met in the bar that night. She was very attractive and seemed stable enough. We would make out for a bit. I would make an unintentional face about something weird she said and she would lose her mind and scream at me in Spanish again. This cycle repeated until about 4 AM. I brought her home while we screamed at each other in the car. It was completely nonsensical. I wasn't mad about anything, but it was exciting, so I kept yelling. She got out of my car, looked at me for a good 30 seconds and silently walked away. I never saw her again. I can't remember her name, but I'll never forget that night. The next day my penis looked like I was blown by a piranha. I went home with a guy while in Spain. His apartment had 2 glass doors to exit, kind of like a glass box. I left the first and tried to open the second. It was locked. I didn't realize that there was a button you had to press. I didn't have the number of the guy, much less his last name or his apartment number, having been too drunk to realize what it was. And so I stood in my heels, messed up makeup, and a tight dress in a glass cage for an hour and a half while all the Spanish people went to church until someone finally came into the building and let me out. I have a few, but this one is particularly shameless. I go out to the bar and start talking to a girl. We both get pretty drunk, start making out on the dance floor, etc. She tells me she's from out of town and is staying at a hotel, and her mom is with her. No problem, I say, because my place is just a short walk from there, and I can walk her to the hotel in the morning. Flash forward to me coming to my senses in the hotel. Her mom sleeping in the same room, and I'm having morning intercourse with her daughter, right next to mom. We also had intercourse the night before, next to her mom. My boyfriend was over one night while I was in HS. We were going at it on the dining room table. We heard my dad get up and start to come downstairs. I couldn't find my pants. Panicked and ran into the kitchen. My boyfriend had his pants on. My dad started to walk towards the kitchen. Boyfriend picked up a giant jar of change and spilled it all over the floor and used the excuse of picking it up to physically block the entrance to the kitchen with his body. My dad walked past him anyways. My genius idea at this point was to open the refrigerator and try to close myself inside. My dad of course walked over and opened the fridge door, took one look at me trying to keep my bits covered, and walked back upstairs. To this day he has never brought it up. I once went home with somebody because I heard he had an awesome apartment and I wanted to see it. I ended up giving him a drunken BJ and throwing up all over his junk. Over 20 years ago, I was 21 or 22. Big party at a co-worker's house. 1 microdot of acid. Smoked some weed. Ate a bunch of fruit that had been soaked in Everclear alcohol. She was big. Not curvy big. I'm cool with curvy. I'm talking spherical big. Big and tall and just really big. I nailed her in the backseat of her Cadillac. Apparently I was back there going at it for hours. Her Cadillac was parked right in front of the house, right by the sidewalk, so every single person that left the party bore witness to my pasty white ass, positively glowing in the moonlight, just jackhammering away. I have no memory of any of this, so how do I know about it? Photos were taken. Starting getting off with a girl in a club. Everything starts to get a bit too heavy for the middle of a bar, so we start to leave to go back to her place for some sweet boning. As we're walking into the street I hear, "So, are you my boyfriend now?" Bear in mind she was 26. I excused myself to the bathroom and ran as fast as my little legs could carry me. I've never went to bed with an unattractive girl, but I've woke up with some. That about sums it up. I woke up on the floor of some Japanese family's living room, and they would not stop screaming. Since everyone is sharing their horrid stories, I'll share mine. I promise. This is 100% true. Anyways, I was at a mini party get together with some friends years ago, and we were all a bit buzzed. I started talking to this girl there who I've known for a couple years. No, she was not hot, but in fact, fairly chilly. We start talking and all, and I can tell signs point to us doing some things. One thing leads to another and we end up in a coat closet and she starts unbuckling my pants and is blowing me. Then out of nowhere, whilst in mid-blow, she starts crying because her parents were in the middle of a brutal divorce. I don't know what it is about teardrops falling ever so gently onto your penis, but it was the quickest deflation of a hard-on I've ever experienced. I hope her parents are okay. I left her in the closet. It looked like she needed to be alone. I made out with a girl in a Teletubby costume. Biggest college regret to this day. She was dressed as Poe. One time in my first year of college I hooked up with this guy named Dylan in our dorms. I was really drunk a couple nights later and wanted to find him, so I began wandering around. I arrived what I thought was his room and the door was open a crack. So I open it to see 2 guys I've never seen before on their computers playing games. I sit on the closest bed and start talking about Dylan and they said they didn't know him. I eventually invite the guy whose bed I was on over. We start fooling around and his roommate, who had still been playing video games, decides to leave. I want intercourse, but he says he's a virgin. I asked what he's done. He says he'd never even kissed a girl. Oops. Later I found out I was on the 4th floor, and not the 5th where Dylan's room was. TL. Dr. Guy received his first kiss for having a conveniently located dorm room. Hooked up with a girl in my shower after a night out. I found her Nuva ring the next morning in my drain. She didn't want it back. I once tried to make a clean getaway in the morning and ended up getting hit in the head by his ceiling fan. Poor guy woke up to me screaming and gushing blood from the head. I still maintain it was his fault for putting his lofted bed right under a ceiling fan. At a staff Christmas party a few of us ended up at one our co-worker's place and she had a hot tub. 3 of us decided to use it, myself, another woman and my boss. I ended up sexing it up with the boss in front of this other girl and took a cab back to his house. The next day was Christmas Eve. I quickly found my clothes, wished him a Merry Christmas and got a cab back to my car. I had to face my co-workers after the holidays knowing they had all seen me naked. That is shame. My brother is 18 years older than me. He married a woman with older children. I slept with her son, my stepnephew. I was drunk 10 years later. Christmas is now weird. I was at this party and I saw this really cute redhead girl. I decided to go over to her and start up a conversation. I am bisexual and needed to find out where she stood on that. Before I could say anything to her, she turned to me and said my name. Holy crap. I was so wasted I did not realize I had already dated her. I could not remember her name at the time. I just smiled and turned away, red-faced. When I was in my second year of university, I hooked up with a less than attractive girl in the shed behind my friend's house. There were bags of trash in the corner of the room, and my friends locked me in while they were drunk, so when I woke up I had to call one of them in the house to come let me out. The worst part? My actual apartment at the time was probably a 20-minute walk from where we were that night, whereas my friend's house was a 20-minute bus ride.